over the next 6 weeks, we have a study called Resurrected, where for the period of 40 days, the resurrected Jesus, appeared to over 500 people, as the Bible writes in. But we're going to zoom in on 6 accounts that are 6 key moments, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to see what the resurrected Jesus had to say and how people responded and how it makes a huge difference in our life. So today's account, Brandon, why don't you set the stage? Because today is the first person and the first one to see Jesus dead and then alive.
Yes. Yeah. So Mary Magdalene, according to the Gospels, is one of the very first people. She's in the group of women who go to the tomb on that Sunday morning. And her story through that whole weekend of Easter is very interesting because she's there at the cross, like seeing Jesus die. She's part of the group that takes Jesus' body to the tomb that Joseph of Arimathea has provided for him. And she sees kind of all this unfold. And when this happens on Friday, they are racing up against the Sabbath. Yeah. Right? Because the Jewish day starts at sundown. So the Sabbath begins on Friday night, according to our reckoning of time. So they are in a hurry to get Jesus' body in the tomb. They're not able to prepare it the way you would want to prepare a body for burial. And so they just kind of throw him in the tomb, wrap his body, and there's this idea that we're going to come back and we'll embalm the body the way we need to.
So let me pause there for a little bit. So Jesus is crucified on a Friday, dies on a Friday afternoon, and by Friday at sundown, they need to be done. And so they're rushing against it. And Mary Magdalene is one of the last people that enters into the tomb where they lay his body, and they're not done quite preparing it. And then presumably would leave and see the tomb entrance sealed by heavy stone.
Yes, yeah. And in fact, after they've sat through this on the Sabbath, like they have to sit with a whole day.
Yeah, and then then it's the Sabbath where you cannot work. And now it's Easter Sunday. For us, it's Easter. And so she's going back after observing the Sabbath to finish the job.
And she recognizes that. That's one of their big concerns. Like it's Mark 16:3 where they're walking to the tomb and they ask this question among themselves, like, who's going to roll the stone away?
Yeah, how's the stone going to be moved?
We don't know. We don't know who's going to get that out of our way so that we can go in and take care of the body, because they don't know, there's been a Roman guard stationed there. They don't know that the stone's been rolled away already. So there's this very deep concern they have, like who's going to take care of this? Who's going to let us in?
Yeah. And I'm assuming the Romans were very careful because they don't want his body being misused in some sort of revolt against it. So that's why they have it under guard as well. And so she goes into the tomb and his body's not there. And she runs back and tells some of the disciples about that. And then eventually Jesus appears.
Yes. Yeah. So there's a lot of kind of chaotic energy in the Gospels around Easter Sunday because there are differences in the accounts. And I think that's because people are seeing it from their perspective. Like all these things are unfolding. No one is sure what to make of it. Mary Magdalene reports it to the disciples. They run and see the tomb is empty, but they don't know why. Yeah. And it's finally when Mary goes back and is weeping at the tomb that they've taken Jesus away, that Jesus himself appears to her. And it's really with the speaking of her name that she recognizes who he is and understands, like, oh, his tomb is empty because he's not dead anymore. Yeah. He's alive, and she becomes this first witness of the risen Lord.
Yeah, and I think even culturally, one of the most interesting things that God in his grace has done on both the announcement of Jesus's birth in the Christmas story and in his death in the Easter story is he uses people that were the least expected, which is, I think, one of those things that you can rely on the Bible. Like if you were to write an account and make this up, you wouldn't use shepherds to be the first people to announce his birth, because a shepherd's testimony wasn't admissible in court.
Right.
And then you wouldn't use a woman, because a woman's testimony was not admissible in court. And yet that is, by God's grace, the very first people that get to announce this message. And so Mary Magdalene's the first person, Brandon, to share the gospel. And I think sometimes we get confused on what the gospel is. The gospel is he was dead and now he's alive. Right. And when you believe that he's alive and that he has defeated death, that changes everything about how we live every day. And we have to really think about that. Like, what does it mean to live believing that there is a God that has come as a man and as a man resurrected back to life? That changes how we live.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of, I think, the points of what we want to talk about in this study, right? Is that the resurrected Jesus is resurrecting us. That he is bringing life to those areas of our life that we feel are dead, that have let us down, over the course of our lives. It's interesting, this past Easter, the Barna Group released a study of, belief in the resurrection, and found out that 50%, like a full half of Christian teenagers who identify as Christians, a full half of them don't believe in the resurrection, which kind of makes you think like, well, in what area are you Christian then?
Yeah.
But it's interesting that this life and this hope that, we proclaim, like we're kind of losing a sense of it. Like this is the resurrection is the historical reality of the resurrection, I should say, is really the linchpin of everything.
Yeah, if it's not true, nothing's true.
Yes, yeah, is that this validates, this proves who Jesus is and what he's done. And this is the power that we live out of. This is the promise we live out of. This is the promise of the empty tomb.
And this is exactly what we can take from this account as we close our time on this account, is that Mary Magdalene was in the tomb when his body was dead, and she was in the tomb when his body was gone, and she saw Jesus in bodily form.
Yeah.
And that's where we can rest all of our hopes. That's where we can rest everything about us, is knowing that that is true.
Right.
And one day it'll be true for us.
Absolutely. And there's a great poem that, well, I guess the whole poem is not great, but there's a phrase that Wendell Berry uses at the end of a poem it's the phrase "practice resurrection." That if we are going to be a people who are living out of the resurrection and the power and the promise of that, then we need to be people who are living and practicing resurrection every day and showing that life to the world around us.